everything we have to continue to work on it now. My name is Paul James. I host English News every morning.
And the Golden Angel Award ceremony.
Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences. Welcome to the East-West Show. Jack Chow, your host, with my dear friend, Mr. Wei Luo, founder and the CEO of California Sunshine Education Center. However, he himself is a special political commentator who I rely upon all the time. By the way, you may see some strange faces, and I want to explain a little bit to you that lots of people reminded me that I should sit here, present myself as a role model of how to obey with the rules of wearing facial protections. And that's why I started with this. Of course, I don't necessarily have to do it throughout the show. I just do it for the purpose of demonstrate to my audiences what are available. This is very cheap, only $5 a piece. If you are going to a place with lots of people, such as a supermarket, right, I recommend you put on one of these. Probably that's your further protection. And speaking of a facial mask like this one, though, I trust my work environment. That's why most of the time I don't wear it. For today, I'm not going to wear it again, but I did start with it to indicate, to show to you it is quite necessary when you are into a brand new environment, when you are seeing people who you do not know where they're from, though, and the best way to do is to use the facial protection. There's another thing. There's lots of criticism about our leaders going everywhere without wearing this. I would recommend that starting today, we would probably call upon our leaders to do the same as we do, to show the example, to demonstrate the importance. All right. So with that as a start, as a lead line, I would like to introduce my dear friend, Mr. Luo Wei, founder and the CEO of California Sunshine California Education Center. He is, by profession, an educator who's been so successfully in the United States as well as in China. He is into no politics. He just combines the two curricular systems into one, made an experimental school in China, which is Wei High, right? Wei High, and been running for 4 years successfully, if I count right. So congratulations on that. And locally to the community, he is a special political commentator, and that's why he is here today. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Jack. Hi, audience. Thank you very much for a long time not being able to present it in your show. And today I feel very honored to be represented again. And
yeah, it's a very good thing, something very celebrative. Probably we should go somewhere, well, nowhere opens anyway, for a cup of beer or something.
We should.
I really wish.
We should.
I really
someday.
wish. But someday, sooner or later, we'll do that. All right.
That's right.
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank
All
you.
right. And the reason I have you here is that I recently had lots of concern, lots of worry, and the worry was so much that I sometimes lost sleep on that. I explained to my friends, to my audiences, the other time on the show, that as a victim of the Chinese Revolution, Cultural Revolution, even these days, after that many years, 50 years, if I had a nightmare, then my nightmare must be Chinese Revolution related. right? I lost my whole family. My family went to nothing from one of the most wealthy family to a point that all we had was a little stool of my father's wooden stool. That's it. Everything was gone totally. I lost my uncle who jumped over a chimney to his own death. As a matter of fact, he was nothing. He was just somebody that had a big mouth. That's it. I inherited from my father's system that I have a big mouth too. Luckily, I'm here. Luckily, I'm here. All right. So, I lost my uncle due to the fact that he had a big mouth, and lots of people lost everything their own. Right. So, now when I look around at what's happening, the statues and the monuments are torn down, and lots of people talking about whoever's right, whoever's life, and we're talking about the monument of even Washington, even Jefferson was endangered, are being endangered at this very moment because of slavery. And the other day I even heard one saying that there are some words to be considered discriminative. For example, master bedroom. The word master should be prevented, according to them, of using. That exactly sound like what we had gone through in China at the start of the Chinese Revolution, right? So, with you, I would like to, to go back to those days. And before that, and what's your total comment? To the general picture about what's happening.
Wow, this is a very big topic, Jack. I have to admit that you wanted me to talk about it today, but I totally agree with you that there are a lot of similarities between the current unrest demonstration of the asking of a black man, Black Lives Matter, with the Cultural Revolutionary launched in China about 54 years ago in 1966 by Mao Zedong and his team. And also it was so-called the nation's disaster by that time, 10 years after revolutionary period by Deng Xiaoping's members. And also what happened currently in the U.S. Is somewhat like what happened in China 54 years ago.
That's where it scares me.
That's right. And but if you take a look at into the details of all those movements in the different society in both China and the U.S., you will find there's a lot of similarity, in a lot of extent. First of all, let's just present what is similar on both movements in both China and U.S. First of all, it is the same social unrest. And it's a kind of unleash of people's emotion as well as feel a kind of oppression that felt by a small group of people. In China 54 years ago, there was call for the revolute for the oppression from the capitalist type of leadership launched by the top leaders. One of a small group of top leaders, according to Mao.
Mao Zedong, that's it.
No, Mao Zedong was off the leadership for quite a few years. After 1940, 64, the 7,000 conference. Let me report it. It's a CCP's history. After 1964's 7,000 conference in Shanghai, Mao Zedong was off the leadership for 3 years. It was led the whole party and the nation was led by Liu Shaoqi and his team.
That's exactly why he initiated the Cultural Revolution.
He listed, during Liu Shaoqi's leadership, according to some historian, that leadership went through some kind of unsocialist leadership style, meaning that allowing private sectors, letting private market, and also letting a small group of people getting richer first place, and also getting richer of those people has led a luxury lifestyle, which is a very, 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 very contradicting to the most of the lifestyle of the people in China was leading by then. So there's a kind of a social emotion as well as feeling of oppression. So Mao Zedong was grasped that kind of feeling, social thoughts, and unleashed this or launched this so-called Cultural Revolution. That's the short history about that movement. But this time is a little bit similar in this way because it started with Dr. George Floyd's death by 3 white policemen.
He was not
Actually,
a doctor, was he?
Excuse me?
George Floyd was not a doctor, was he?
Oh, Mr. I'm sorry.
Mr. Yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Mr.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. Suddenly
I'm
he has
thinking
a
about
kind of
Dr.
degree.
King.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
So it was the death of Mr. Floyd and started the national demonstration.
It
It's
was the death of what?
Mr. Floyd.
Mr. Floyd.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
Mr. Floyd. It was initiated by the death of Mr. Floyd, who was killed, so-called killed by
Murdered.
4 police, murdered. Some people
Murdered,
call
yes.
it, yeah, murdered by 4 policemen, and happened to be that 3 out of those 4 are whites, and that's basically that started. For the rest of them, everybody knows what's happening in the rest. Why is people getting so emotional? To me, it's basically 400 years of history, slavery history in this country, and also the discriminated status as well as not satisfactory lifestyle or social-economic status of a small group of African American people still experiencing today.
All right.
That
Let's
caused
take
that arrest.
Let's take a short moment out. We come back to continue from right there, please. All right, my dear friend, we'll be right back.
Continue to work on it now. My name is Paul James. I host this news every morning.
And the Golden Angel Award ceremony.
Hello, dear friends, my lovely audience. Welcome back to the show. Jack Chow on the East West with my friend, Mr. Wei Luo, founder and the CEO of California Sunshine Education Center. Also, he's a commentator in the community, political commentator. I'll call him special political commentator because he and we all had the same experiences as being victims of the Cultural Revolution in China, which exactly fits in today's subject. Today's subject exactly for the concern, for the fear, for the trepidation about having a cultural revolution in the United States, which is a country I paid everything in my life for to choose to stay as my country. I adopted as my fatherland. So now, with Mr. Wei Luo, we touched base with how the Chinese Revolution, the Cultural Revolution happened, and we found a similarity of those two. You know what? I'm not a political person. I don't have any problems with who fights against who for their political power or for their political gains. The part that I worry about is they use a certain kind of like a methodology that they create a movement, in which they inject their ideology to the movement, right? For example, right now, they're talking about equality. Of course, with the system, equality is always a word to be checked, to be implemented, and to be corrected, right? Because we have a beautiful system that doesn't reject criticism, right? But problem is that when you push to a point that you topple down all the monuments and statues, that reminds me about those days when they toppled Confucius monument, Confucius temple, Confucius statues. Do they have similarities too?
Let me answer your question. And to answer your question, we have to go back to the U.S. history, especially the slavery history, a little bit, so that we can understand what's happening nowadays. And in terms of statutes, for example, we have to go back, especially statutes of Jefferson, right? Washington and Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. And let me tell you that both of them are one of two of the largest slave masters back 200 years ago, 240 years ago.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, that 18 presidents of the United States owned slaves at a time. And it happened to be that Thomas Jefferson was the largest of them, who owned 600 slaves by 270 some years ago. So that is if you take a look at what the African American slaves experienced in the past 400 years, especially 243 years before the Lincoln's proclamation launched, that you will see a very dark history, painful history, and of what African American people experienced in that era. And there's a book, and also Hollywood make it a movie called 12 Years in Slavery. That is a real discrimination, real description of how African American slave experienced in this country's history. That is a dark history. There's no question about it. That is the, I would say, that the inherited guilt of this country. And that's why that people feel angry 400 years after the first African American slave landed in this country, that Mr. George Floyd killed or murdered by white policemen. That's a symbolic of a kind of white supremacy oppressed the African American Mr. George. That's a kind of symbolic. But the reality is more complicated. First of all, that small group of African American people still feel that they are oppressed in the reality, which is true. Because let me, for example, that the average black people in this country only own 1/6 of total wealth than a white American. That's today's reality. And for same credential, same education, same experience background, two people, one is black, one is white, and the white is earning 30% more salaries than that same
Good point.
black American.
Good strategy, because
That's a reality.
once you master the wealth,
That's right.
you master the answer. All right.
And also, however, from the other side of the story, we also see that African American make a great progress in the social life and the political life. For example, and today's Congress, which is 117th Congress, that African American Congress people representative holds 53 seats.
Okay.
while in comparison, Latino only holds 43 seats. And African American representatives hold same proportion as to their population in the total US population, which is 12%.
Okay.
However, in comparison, Latino population holds about 18% of the total American population, while their representative only holds 12% in the Congress.
Okay, all right.
So they make a great progress in the social and political life.
Numbers speak.
That's right. In a social level, and we have 3 out of 50 states governors of African American. And also we have lawyers, we have doctors, we have generals.
Yes.
All of them are black. Actually, 4 general star will be appointed. One of the African American 4 general star will be appointed as the army chief of the army of this country, who is also African American, right? So if we take all those pictures, put them, puzzle them together, we will find a contrast image. In the one side, African American people achieved greatly in social political life and also economically as well. I will later present some figures to you. In the other side, we still see that 1/4 of American population living on the bottom of the social life in terms of poverty, education, as well as political life. That's the contrasts.
Very good, very good. I really appreciate that you brought those strong numbers, because as we say, numbers speak, right? Numbers do not have prejudice. Numbers do speak. That's one way, that's one side of the story. On the other side of the story, which was the concept that I shared with some of my friends, such as Mr. Nebe, Chris Nebe, such as Mr. Joe Gardner, all of them are my dear guests on this show. I believe what the numbers show are the more or less the reality that we are in the fight, we are winning the fight. And on the other hand, ideologically, when idealism is concerned, people, especially those few who still share the white supremacies, believe from the time of Christopher Columbus, by the way, whose statue is being toppled already, right? That this is their land. They are the owner of the land. Even though they can't say it publicly now, to the bottom of their mind, though, they still have the concept of my land. I believe at the time when Officer Chauva, right, Derek Chauvin, was putting his knees on Floyd, right, even after he stopped breathing, stopped struggling, stopped yelling for 2-something minutes, there to the bottom of his mind is that it's my land, that kind of thing. So I don't know if my connotation was right or wrong. Let's take a break and come back. I would like to hear your comment on that, please. In other words, conceptually, we're facing a different story. We'll be right back.
And a Golden Angel Award ceremony.
Hello, my friends, my lovely audiences. Welcome back to the show. Jack Chow on the East West with my dear friend, Mr. Wei Luo, founder and the CEO of California Sunshine Education Center. We're today talking about the fact that a lot of people worry at this very present time that there is some symptom going on, which is a very, very, very super unhealthy, and to us, Chinese Americans who had once been the victims of the Chinese Revolution, we are scared even more because we know what exactly a cultural revolution is like. All right, now back to the point. Mr. Wei Luo gave us some numbers to show, for example, in the House of Representatives of 435, we have 53 members being black Americans, right? And everywhere indicates about the same. And on the picture, I see one picture, very interesting. You have one black cop arresting one black felony, and with one black attorney being his defense attorney. So in other words, color doesn't matter. It's what you choose to do matters, right? Okay, now, from that one, I move to the fact that to the moment of the killing of George Floyd by former officer Derek Chauvin, at the bottom of his mind, he must have adopted the principle, it's my land, it's my land, it's my country, it's my land, that kind of thing. Otherwise, he will not be that determined to terminate that life. So my comment, right or wrong, yours, please.
Thank you very much, Jack. And I don't think I have the position to judge you are right or wrong. I just wanted to present my understanding about this issue, and just to take away from what I presented in the last period. The point I want to make is that at this moment, this country does not have a systematic discrimination, segregation, as well as the white supremacy feeling in a society. There's no question about that. No systematic discrimination. Even there's no, according to my investigation, there's no systematic police brutality over certain group of people, ethnic group of people. This is my fact. If somebody want to argue with me, I'm very, very eager to share my point with them. This is the first point I want to make. Secondly, is that why we're still seeing a lot of African American people feel so segregated, feel so equalitily treated in the real social life. Let me present it. You just mentioned that white supremacy as well as a systematic segregation. And we have to admit that this country had a white supremacy ideology overflowing the mainstream 50 years ago. By the time there is a theory called scientific racialism. According to this theory, that white supremacy, and basically the African American people, let's just call it black people, and white people is an evolution of a human being. And before that, there is monkeys, basically. From monkeys to white people in the African American people, or people in black sitting in the middle. So that their thought is that white is always superior to all the ethnic races, including black, definitely, and they call us yellow, right? By then, that was a systematic mainstream theory 160 years ago. And about 1882, there's a law doctrine called Jim Crow for people, mainstream people. Everybody knows Jim Crow, but for Asian American people, especially as an immigrant,
Chinese Exclusion Act.
American, as well as the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Yeah.
Those are systematic segregation, as well as the targeting certain group of people. It was only until 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education Act, law case Supreme Court judge, that the system till down the systematic segregation of the certain group of people. However, in the common thought, especially for the people's conscience, especially in the families.
One thing for sure, can we confirm the white supremacies are never gone?
It is never gone.
Never gone.
It is never gone. That's why that contract, especially struggle between this group of people as well as the small group of people of color, always clashes each other. And it happened to be that white people in this country has a social economic priority or the better position over that colored group, including black and Asian group of people. So in a lot of cases, we're seeing white versus black.
As a matter of fact, the recent anthropology found out, and it's confirmed by Mr. Ivan Jiang in his book, that we human race were originated in Africa. All in Africa. Only a branch of which went to up north towards the pole.
I agree with. Let make a long story short. And unfortunately, that theory was developed in the 80s, not in the 1880s. It's developed 1980s, 100 years after the so-called.
No. Yeah, exactly.
So
we are talking about now.
So that doesn't do good, or that doesn't fight strong enough for a kind of thought rooted back 200 years ago.
We belong to the same origin, black, white, whatsoever.
However, a lot of people are less educated. You have to admit it. A small group of people, especially small targeted group of people, we call it white supremacy.
Yeah,
they are less educated, they are less wealthy, not a mainstream representative.
That's why we
of
call
whites.
them white supremacies, right? But the fact is that
But some white interestingly, you will find that white supremacy thought or ideology does not only exist among those lower socioeconomic class of white people.
that given the fact, even though the death of Floyd has to be justified in a big way for a big time, even though we all support the fight against the white supremacy, the fight against the discrimination, we do not support violation, right? Looting, burning cars, looting, robbing shops. They are separate cup of teas.
Jack, I have to tell you, that's a common sense. Those activities are criminals. There's nothing about white supremacies. There's nothing about slavery history. Nothing about inequality.
But the problem
Those are criminals.
But the problem is, they are being supported by political groups. That is what worries me. Somebody pays $200 per day for them to do what they do, or $15 or $20 per hour for demonstration for whatsoever. Those are being utilized by political power exactly same as Mao Zedong during his time in China. That's exactly what worries me, my friend.
There's no worry about this. We know how this country treats criminals. The people who are looting, who are robbing, and the people behind them are all group of criminals. We will put them on trial. No worry about this. If we trust this country, if we still have a trust on the system of this country, of these founding fathers set it up almost 300 years ago, we have to believe that those criminals will sooner or later put on trial. Don't worry about that. I'm not worried about this.
And we need to find out the political power behind it. That's even more criminal. You know what? They are utilizing
I just
the
said,
situation.
The people
to
who
do
are
it.
looting, the people who are robbing, and people who are behind them,
Yeah.
all are criminals.
I call them political conductors, right? Including the conductors. They have to pay what they did.
I don't call them political conductors, Jack. You know what I call them? I call them mastermind of criminals. There's no question about this.
All right.
So don't
the
confuse.
Same thing.
Don't confuse about wrong ideologies. Who has people who are very, very legitimate in the social life, political life. They obey laws, but they only bear some kind of ideology. We call them white power, or you call them white supremacy. They thought that they are superior to others, but they never put their action against the laws and rules. Those are the people we have to separating them from those of a group of people who are criminals, period.
If you look at the timing, you will find out right now we're at the moment that we're hit by the pandemic, right? Which takes lots of lives. According to this morning, we have about 500,000 deaths already, and among which, so we have
We take 1/5.
1/5 of the whole thing, right? So that's bad enough. This is the moment. Another moment is that this is the 2020 election, presidential election. This country needs to be justified or re-justified whatsoever as a ship to go forward on its course, right? And number three, at this very moment, though, you're talking about this country being even more divided, split apart. That is the thing that worries me so much.
Thank you very much. You pointed out another topic I wanted to discuss with you today is that dividing of this country according, based upon the color of their skin as well as the different type of ideologies. And unfortunately, this president was elected by manipulating the colors, by manipulating the racial issues.
All right. My dear friends, we're exactly hitting the nail on the head. Let's take a short moment now. We come back to exactly tell you why we are so worried about it, what the similarities are, and what we want to do to prevent it from happening. Stay with us. We'll be right back, please.
Everything we have to continue to work on it now. My name is Paul James. I host English News every morning.
And a golden angel award ceremony.
Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences. Welcome back to the show Check Chow on the East West with my friend, Mr. Wei Luo, founder and the CEO of California Sunshine Education Center, and he is as well as a political commentator. We're on the subject of the Cultural Revolution because what's happening now looks so scary to me, to I believe everyone of my make, half Chinese, half American, and Chinese American call it, who are experiencing, who have experienced the Chinese Cultural Revolution as a victim. We know exactly what to do because preventing it from happening is the key point, right? So back to you. You were making some important point about that political ideology, right? All right, you got to take it off. We're on and off, on and off, right? Okay, anyway.
So we have to, sorry, audience, this is not convenient for both of us. We have to take it back and forth very frequently. But this is a demonstration of how important that we make ourselves protected by being so close socially in distance, so that we can just curve the curve and make sure that we're protected. And hopefully you are doing the same thing. But go back to our topic. And I think that yes, I think that we do have, American faces a lot of extreme topics, very serious topics in our social life as well as the political life. Number one is that inequality of a small group of people in the bottom of the socio-economic hierarchy. For example, in this group of people of color, not only African American peoples. We have peoples from Asian island. We have people from Southeast Asia. We have people from Latin Americans. All those people are categorized into the lower socioeconomic category. Those are the people that their wealth, their treatment, their justice right are so equally, inequally be treated in the social life. And if you take a look at the figures of those of their wealth, educated level of education, as well as their career indexes, you will find that the huge gap between the top group as well as the lower group. This is we call it inequality of social life and socioeconomic status. And number two is that the racial segregation, or I would say racial dividing. And this is a part of it. Another thing is that I may probably put it as the most important or extreme, that controversial dividing is that political ideology. And
what scares
partisan dividend is so huge.
Partisan division, racial division, culture division,
wealth division,
or political position division. Okay, back in China during the revolution, right? You are the revolutionary or counter-revolutionary, right? And between revolutionary counter-revolution, there is a fight everywhere and across the whole country. And Mao Zedong benefited from it by consolidating his power, by toppling down Liu Shaoqi, which is the chairman of China at that very moment. Though, okay, now back to the struggle between revolutionary and counter-revolutionary, quote unquote. I probably want to give some of my audiences, especially American audience who never knew anything about the Cultural Revolution, some examples, some stories. You know Xin Fengxia? Xin Fengxia was one of the most famous actor of Pingji, right? She committed suicide because she could not stand the torture performed to her by the revolutionary, because that time she was considered a counter-revolutionary. After her death, you never knew. Lots of people do not know what happened to her dead body. The revolutionary insisted that she had a radio for telegraphs, all right, so that the telegraphs contact her with her in Taiwan. When you know what they did? They cut her open. The cut was 3 feet long to find the quote-unquote radio. That's the revolution. That's in name of revolution. All because he's revolutionary and he's counter-revolutionary.
Yeah, that's Jack. Let me put it that way, because we have a long topic to talk. You have only limited time. What I want to say is that every social unrest movement comes along with criminals. Those are criminals that we see in China, both in China and also in the U.S. Lootings or robberies, all those.
But in China, those ones who cut her open are still in power.
In the name of revolutionary. That's basically what is called
in the name of revolutionary.
So in today's world, what we have to take lesson from China or from the human history mistakes.
The son of Deng Xiaoping.
Let me finish it.
The son of Deng Xiaoping, Deng Pufang.
Hey, Jack.
Jumped over the building.
Jack, let's just generalize the topic by saying this, that every social movement comes up with criminals. There's no question about it. That's the cost of social unrest as well as a social
In that case,
movement.
Mao Zedong
So
is a
that's
criminal.
why we have to
Mao
put-
Zedong was a criminal.
So that's why we have to admire the rule by law, not rule by thoughts. We have admire rule by regulations, rule by systems, not rule by thoughts and religious.
Okay,
There's
what-
no question about that.
No. What
in, the
worries-
social, in the modern society, we have this successful, especially the most civilized
What
society.
worries
We
me-
have this successfully segregating
Yeah.
thoughts, religions
Yeah, you're
from
right,
the
you're right,
social
you're right.
administration
What-
and government
what
and
worries
governance.
me
And
exactly-
let me finish. Let me finish. What we have to do in today's world, that we have to go back to original. What is right, what is wrong, is that everything has to be behaved, or governed by law and rules. And others who are outrage of these rules and laws will be punished. There's no question about it. There's no difference of color and white, color and races. Everybody
Let me
who are
give
criminals are,
you're
are
right.
justice.
Let
Will be
everybody-
put on
yeah,
justice.
I understand.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
And then when today's world, don't feel emotion about the criminals, because criminals are criminals. There's always criminals, no matter where you go, right? So, but our focus is that how we gonna correct, how we gonna heal as a society from today's status quo you just mentioned. We have a partisan dividend, we have a wealth dividend, we have the education dividend. As the leader of this
Plus
country,
color
especially
division.
color division, as a leader of this country, especially who are campaigning for the White House, as a top leader of governors, we expect someone who can unify, who can never up those gaps instead of enlarge it and just manipulate it as the campaign policy.
I totally understand. However,
That's my point.
Yeah, that's a policy. That's a principle. When principle versus the reality, though, what you see people are fighting against history. To me, history is a book. History is done. Right or wrong is done already, right? So our founding father, George Washington, was a slave owner. Back then, at that time, well, that was prevailing. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. Back then, it was prevailing because that history. All we want to do is learn from history to prevent history from happening again. Not to go against history, to change history. All right? Now, let me give you an example that scares me so much. In the capital city of South Carolina, Charleston, right? And they are toppling two statues, right? And it was a city decision, city council resolution based upon the protest, right? And there are 13 members on the council, right? They voted yes to topple them down. You know the voting result? It doesn't surprise me if it goes at 6-7 or 5-8, right? Something like that. It was not unanimously 13 versus 0. Conceptually, we are that far from extremism, right? So we're dangerous, all right? I want you to give a sum up of today's discussion, please. We have about less than a minute.
Thank you very much. Be honored if I could. I actually, based upon our discussion, we think that criminals and also extremists, especially you said that even those unanimous agreed with certain things, which is very, very
13 versus 0.
versus 0, 13 people voted yes on those very highly controversial topic in this country, especially it's related to the scar, to the guilt of this country, nation. They are still smaller, very group of people. As a society at large, the society at large, we have to make sure that our leaders basically are the unifiers, not dividers. And our policymakers has to consider not only we have a policy in place, but also we have to make sure that social practice, especially in the areas of education, health, wealth construction, and we have to make sure that all the group of people are treated equal. And one thing I wanted, which is only represented in my personal view, is that we don't treat preferentially small group of people over the others.
Those are
the questions.
Yeah, those are
we need to discuss this later on. But
important points.
Yes.
That
and
probably we have to do another show, shall we?
That's right. From the policy point of view, that although we have already tailed down the systematic segregation and discrimination for the people of color, however, in a social practice, especially in social and political as well as economic life, that we have to make sure that inequality will be in place.
Okay, my friend, we're over time. Thank you very much for the wrapping up. My dear friends, we need to talk about it on this continuously, maybe another show. I'll see you another time. All right. Thank you very much for watching. And to Mr. Wei Luo, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Jack.